Hey guys, it's Kevin. Welcome to episode 4. It has never been more important for the church to have a great online broadcast mix. But how do you approach that as an engineer? Armando is back and he's joined by Luke Vogel and Mike Ward. Now these guys approach their broadcast mix very differently, but they both have incredible mixes. Luke Vogel, who is over at Church of the Highlands, helped them go multi-site very early on, and he runs his broadcast mix from a separate console. Now Mike Ward, who's over at Seacoast Church, he does his mix a little bit differently. He runs both his front of house and his broadcast mix from the same board. Let's hear what the guys have to say about their mixing strategies for front of house versus broadcast.
Today is a great day for me. One of the things I love about being in this industry is when I get to hang out with two people whose mixes I genuinely love and respect and learn from and glean. And so today's just going to be a fun conversation tackling that subject of, the front of house mix coming from broadcast and then broadcast mix criteria with Luke and Mike. And obviously with the way the world has been shaping up, more than ever now, the ability to communicate outside the walls of the church is so critical. And the idea of how do we capture what's going on in the room and make that an amazing replication to those outside the walls. So Luke, why don't you kick us off with how you roll at Highlands?
Yeah. So we have been online for a long time, and we have kind of morphed over the years. Originally, it was just the stereo bus off the console, and then we had an outboard limiter compressor that just kind of smashed it a little bit, and that was it. It was before online was much of a thing, so it was kind of an afterthought. It wasn't really something we put a lot of effort and energy into. Then it ended up being an additional stereo aux mix off the console, and we were able to fine tune it a little bit more, and same thing, just kind of compress it a little bit, throw it out there. And then after a while we decided, man, this is really something we want to lean into, so we grabbed a dressing room backstage and threw a little console in it and started mixing broadcast from back there, and took it up a notch. And most recently, we have kind of acoustically treated that room a little bit more. It's still really pretty tough because you have to deal with, of course, trying to mix a broadcast environment in a studio scenario with, it's right backstage. So like all the sub energy from the auditorium is just rolling around backstage, and it makes it difficult to hear what's going on. But basically, we're just doing our best to get a really clean, replication experience of what's going on in the room. So if people are at home online or on their phone, they can kind of catch the spirit of what's going on in the room.
Right.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
What are you monitoring with?
So we're in a little bit of flux right now, but we have an SSL console, and I've got a pair of PMC IB1s, and then a small pair of Pelonis. I don't even know the model numbers, but they're just the little 4-inch Pelonis dual concentric speakers with the sub, and I've got a pair of Avant Tones, kind of just give me a few different perspectives, and then a nice pair of headphones. So primarily just on the bigs, but floating around a little bit between the different.
Right. Just to get
Yeah. Well, and truthfully, like, I'm not actually the one pushing the faders back there very often at all. It's been a really long time since I spent much time in broadcast as the guy that's actually on the console. But we've tried to make it, easy is kind of maybe the wrong term, but we've tried to make it simple enough so that we can get different guys up to speed to be able to push faders back there and create a good environment.
Mike, how do you do it?
Like Luke, it's kind of morphed over the years. Started with just a raw stereo bus feed, no compression, no anything really. Kind of what went to the stereo bus went online, and levels were all over the place between speakers and music and everything else. And similar to what Luke said, it was just kind of an afterthought, something we did, but we didn't really find value in it outside of maybe the pastor listening to his message back during the week.
Note taking.
Yeah.
Critiquing.
And then, it kind of morphed into, similar to him, like a stereo aux feed that we mixed underneath front of house. And I stuck there for a long time, actually. And then I think one day I just felt like my mixes were decent enough in the room. So I said, I wonder what would happen if I just took my stereo bus feed and sent it to like a mastering
Are you
unit.
talking about in the room you're in now?
No, this is in a different room.
Okay.
And I thought, well, what if I send this to like a mastering bus or like a mastering unit? It was actually an old piece of hardware that did some multi-band compression, some limiting, and just kind of brought the levels up. And I was pretty inspired by that. And so that kind of morphed into what I'm doing now, which is basically for the band, I'm taking whatever's going to the stereo bus is going to my mastering feed. And then I do a separate support aux system for speakers and playback and stuff like that, so I can just match the levels between everything before it hits the mastering chain.
Right?
Yeah.
Once it hits the mastering chain, it goes straight to video control and gets embedded into the video, and that's it.
So within that, because you both mix in large-scale rooms, and now with staff at a premium.
Yeah.
And so, back in the day, you had seemingly you had enough people that you can run a monitor mix, broadcast mix, and a front of house mix, and have an assistant that could go do stuff as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seems like those days are becoming a challenge.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
So considering both of you pre the idea of the process of definition to now post, kind of talk about what are some of the nuances you're finding in your ability to mix in that space and make that happen.
I mean, I think that the biggest thing that I've noticed, and of course we're mixing broadcast in an entirely different room on an entirely different console, and I think the biggest thing that we've noticed is our crowd mics just seem easy, like more even. Before it was like, okay, certain crowd mics would give you the sound of the room, but really that's the sound of the PA blown into those microphones. And like then other mics, maybe up front, might give you some of the people on the front row, but it felt really dry and weird. And so you're trying to match all of these different pairs of crowd mics and maybe even throwing some reverb on it to try to smooth them all out and put them together. And
Smear them a little bit.
I think, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just kind of make it a little bit more of a thing. And of course, throwing all the delay on all the crowd mics to bring them back to the PA so you're not getting weird slap. But I think now it feels more even from a crowd mic perspective, which truthfully is really cool because then you have the ability to, hey, this person in the back middle of the room is clapping or giving an amen, and this guy up front is giving an amen or clapping. And it doesn't sound like this guy is super far away and this guy's right on top of the microphone.
Yeah.
That's a great
It's kind of
point.
like there's just this softening going on to the crowd mic.
Because at the end of the day, growing up mixing for certain ministries, Bishop would always say, I need more audience. People need to hear the audience. So I spent years developing that. So one of the things I always teach guys when they're mixing broadcasts, I need you to go sit down in the middle of the sanctuary during a service. Put a little recorder and record what you hear. And at that point, master that, so that becomes the way you shape your mix. Because a lot of times, we get guys who are studio cats, and they're mixing for an album.
Oh, yeah.
But we're mixing for the audience. So you're saying because of the way the room is shaped now acoustically, you're getting more of a consistent experience.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And the mics are telling you that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's cool.
I think for me, going from like just a normal room to a definition room has been a game changer for being able to mix front of house and broadcast from the same console and the same mix. Before I had a decent mix in a decent room, but you always heard like the compromises I had to make for the room front of house mix and the broadcast mix.
Okay.
Sure.
I'd find times where I think a lot of front of house guys run this, I don't have time to necessarily pull up the PA in virtual or the room's full or whatever, so I'll throw in some headphones. And I get a great mix on headphones, but then I'd put it through the PA and it just didn't work, so I had to make some tweaks. And so there was always this compromise between the room and the broadcast mix. And like, I never could really overcome that. With the definition process, entering my room, really and truthfully, like most virtual sound checks, I don't do with a PA on. I just do with in-ears or headphones. As soon as I turn the PA on, it sounds just like it did in the headphones. What that does for me, confidence-wise, is allows me to mix on Sunday without really ever checking my broadcast outside of levels, and knowing that if it sounds good in the room, it's going to sound good online. I don't have to worry about it. And that's really just been a game changer because A, we didn't have to buy another console.
Yep.
B, I don't have to hire someone else to mix it. C, the problem that I would run into if I did have a broadcast console, I don't have the funds to hire someone, so I'd have to have a volunteer to mix it, and it might not be as good as it needs to be. So I really run into all these problems.
Yep.
And just being able to know that if it sounds good in the room, it's going to sound good online coming off my stereo bus. Like, that's a game changer for me. I mean, it saves us money, it saves me time. I mean, it saves me so many headaches. And it's just really been a game changer for us.
Especially from a low end perspective. Like when you have a room where your low end translates off your stereo bus mix to like someone's car or someone's TV, that's impressive.
Yeah. It's huge. It really is. And honestly, like, I'm not going to say, like, I had to really rethink how I mixed a room. I mean, the definition process and the definition rooms really made me kind of rethink my mixes just in general, because I was no longer mixing to the room. I was mixing to my ears because the room didn't get in the way. And it was just a really cool experience. But just thinking about that, like turning off my subs and mixing just on the PA and getting the low end right really helps that translate to online tremendously better than cranking the subs and getting all my low end out of the subs, and that never translates to online.
Because the only people that are hearing the subs are the people in the room.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the two things I find interesting between the two scenarios is matched experience. Your microphones, your audience mics are telling you that from your room.
Right.
Your transfer function of the console is telling you from
100%,
your room.
Yep.
And so I remember you and I having the conversation about sub energy and all that, and I would apply that, because again, you think about it when you're doing a concert, and if the promoter can only have one guy that can mix broadcast and front of house, and they don't have to pay somebody. So learning those tricks in a room that has definition becomes incredibly easy.
Hugely
because you
easy.
trust, like you said, I'm now mixing the art of the room, not around the room.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of trust, it's not just my trust. I think one of the hugest advantages that I found of it is my band can go listen to the broadcast mix, love it, and come back and know that's what it sounded like in the room.
Right.
So boom, I made so much trust with my band. Like if I'm like, hey, can we tweak this? They're like, of course. Like you get that sound, whatever we need to do, we do. And it's just made the musicians happier on stage because they know what's going on. I mean, they'll literally leave after the first set and during the message, and they'll go watch back, and they'll send a text. Man, mix sounds awesome. Like they're stoked now.
That's
the rest of the weekend.
Yeah.
And that's just a huge win for trust. And I think that's one of my favorite things about mixing broadcast in front of house is like my band knows what it sounded like in the room, and they're happy.
Guys, thanks a lot. I mean, obviously for me, I always enjoy these conversations, and I think obviously this is the first time we've been on camera together, but we've had these conversations a lot, and I appreciate your hearts for both of you are very talented but humble about it, and you got different processes and different strategies, but the net result is the striving to make the gospel accessible to the people outside the walls of the church while enjoying the experience inside the walls. And so I just from my heart, I appreciate that. So thank you guys both for coming and sharing and
thank you.
allowing we'll all run our mouths.